Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Mob Psycho 100. Ultimately, I'm going to tell you and let you know how the first season for me went, or how it went and gone and is gone from my life. So I'm going to break it down to, I'm going to talk about this anime in a very cryptic-like sense, give you spoiler times, and then go into it. So, ultimately, if someone has never heard of Mob Psycho 100, what is this anime about? Reasonably, to me, this does present with a lot of hard visuals. But then again, also looking at those visuals, I'm like, man, this show seemed to have put together, it took a lot of time seemingly to do portions of this show. It felt like there was a lot of real investment going into the show by how detailed every little idiosyncrasy is, and how there's some characters with 50 some odd eyes, or there's an opening credit scene with a million different little Where's Waldo-ish things in the intro. Going through this, ultimately, for other people that probably have seen a lot of other kind of animes at portions of time, or just kind of movies in general, it kind of feels like it is kind of making fun of the supernatural genre. I think it's kind of parroting off the supernatural genre, like Ghostbusters, or the supernatural shows and stuff like that. Kind of mocking people that would go into sprinkling salt whenever there's a ghost appearance, or check for cold spots and this and that, or try to make some money making scheme off of performing a exorcism. There's certain rates per exorcism, which I think was actually hilarious to me. Honestly, I think there's a lot of people that went out of their way to very straight-laced approach this anime, and they were just like, this doesn't seem accurate, that doesn't seem accurate, but when looking at it, I just had a lot of fun when finally seeing a show in some way that would go out of its way to make fun of the supernatural genre to me, or psychics. Ghostbusters tried to do that in Ghostbusters 2, where they had the world of the psychics, and they had the Bill Murray doing the world of the psychics intro, and I think that was kind of making fun of psychics and how they have to have their own shows and stuff I think that was kind of a little jab at that a little bit. Because a lot of times you would find out that these people are frauds, or what powers that they say they have isn't exactly all that ooh wow amazing, which ultimately kind of placates into this kind of show where that's kind of an ultimate kind of attempt. If anybody were to other than take this thing as a parody and not for what it is, it's you're missing the fun out of it, I think. You're missing the, I'm gonna have some fun watching this goofy anime. Speaking of anime, there is also a YouTube channel that is, dare say, out there called KNK Anime. Ultimately, if you guys like Mob Psycho 100, ultimately KNK Anime, to the second of this recording currently right now, is reviewing the early episodes of this Mob Psycho 100. So ultimately, for me, I'm reviewing an entire season. They're reviewing individual episodes, or kind of a batch of episodes all together. For me, ultimately, I just always found it easier to just review an entire season, and pretty much every single episode is 20 minutes in time, so I can bust out an entire season of a anime show in seemingly a couple hours. So, going into this show, because a lot of times, a lot of the shows are 12 episodes, or 24 episodes, or 26 episodes. I'm like, oh my god, I want to just go and just watch it all as soon as I get hooked. But man, going through all these episodes, like at least it's not like a normal like 45 hour show, so that's great. That's great. Anyways, going into this show, like I said, check out Anime. I'll leave a link down below for you guys to go, and I'll link you to the very first pilot episode that they ultimately review of Mob Psycho 100. You guys can check that out and kind of catch up on Anime. I'll also leave a link for their channel as well, just in case you want to check out other things. But I think I kind of left a comment on their channel, and they got back to it right away, and they're just kind of like, and they're kind of looking for suggestions, but then they're also like, they want to get like certain things done and bang things out, which is perfectly fine for them, this and that. So me pitching that out there, ultimately they're roughly at like 700 subs, so they're about 300 away right now from ultimately getting monetized. So, I apologize for that long lead-in, but I did start to review this show. So, anyways, this is a very much tongue-in-cheek kind of funny thing going on. It's really to me, it kind of very much reminds me, if again you haven't seen other kinds of anime. This kind of feels like if One Punch Man was kind of like in the supernatural realm, or the spiritual realm, or whatever you want to call it. The psychic Professor Xavier realm. Because there's a lot of times where, of course, like the Matrix Neo, we have the bending of the spoons happening on the show. Ultimately, for me, I wish that there would have been a much more, like, if you're gonna have that kind of thing in here, go to an extreme. Like, have it to where you have, like, a poltergeist-esque, like, thing, where every time they get up every morning, and you have, like, a stack of chairs on top of a table, and it never makes sense. It's just like, well, it must be his powers, like, working at night, or whatever. Like, have it to where ultimately when he walks into a room, all of a sudden all the vending machines like bend over and break, or so. I don't know. You can go into very much extreme measures. Like, why is it just like bending spoons? But ultimately, for me, it's just like, meh. Like, I think that is kind of the obvious. Like, hey, if you want to tell that this person is psychic, here is the movie, TV, everything equivalent of, hey, this guy's a psychic, because that's the only thing that they can showcase on TVs and shows to let everybody know the qualifications. Hey, this person can bend a spoon, even though they've kind of showed it on some shows that some people like have like strong enough hands and they could just bend a spoon with their thumb, and that's the trick. Anyways, so going into this show, I thought it was kind of funny all the way through. There was a couple times that I got some pretty good chuckles. Reasonably for me, there was a lot of goofy designs going on, a lot of weird and or strange characters going throughout this season, and we also kind of have like the early stages of a young man who is ultimately kind of realizing that he can't just be this psychic like kid, and that's not all he wants to be, because ultimately once you kind of become this like overpowerly strong being that can just like poof gone kind of things with a lot of stuff. In a One Punch Man like way, like we have this character that is striving to like consider doing other things to just kind of bide his time, instead of making his psychic ability stronger. He is trying to make his physical body stronger, so that way ultimately instead of having to fight people with his mind, he can fight people with his fists or his ultimately just kind of either that or not fighting at all, choosing a diplomatic solution or choosing just not to fight, kind of wearing his opponent down at a lot of times, which I thought was like well, yeah, it's kind of obvious if this person does use their power, and ultimately there is a reason for why that this thing ultimately has a thing called 100. I was just like, okay, so like 100, like I'm assuming that like maybe this is like the Lucy Scarlett Johansson like attempt where ultimately when looking at it you probably only use probably 10% of your brain normally. So I'm assuming that this kid probably starts to use much more of his brain percentage than a normal human would. And because ultimately, I guess psychics do kind of have that, where they have this like this ability to use much more than just 10% of their normal brain. So ultimately, when I saw like a counter up of percentages, I was like, oh, I get it. So it's like the Lucy Scarlett Johansson scenario, which ultimately I had seen that movie, and I was like, oh, okay, so this is just like that. But then again, I also kind of felt it was like it's kind of just like the movie Akira, but instead of having like motorcycles and this and that and like it's much more of like a supernatural-ish like thing. It's like nobody's having a seemingly dream sequence where like somebody is like attacking him while he's waking up from sleep or whatever. Not quite like that. So anyways, we go into this and we ultimately have a I guess I'll kind of give people a lead up. So if you've never seen an episode of this, letting you know right now, I'm going to kind of give you a lead up of what this show is so you can kind of be prepared of what it is. Because people might not know what this show is at all because there's a lot of random visuals whenever you've seen Mob Psycho 100. Ultimately, also, where can you go to see this show? Ultimately, you can go into an app that I've been fairly consistently watching, Anime Bogo. Anime, of course, if you know how to spell anime, then you probably don't need me to spell it at this point. And Bogo, Bogo. Check that out. Definitely. I've seen a plethora of different animes on there. It seems like just as many animes as Funimation. But ultimately, you can check this show out on Funimation as well. Ultimately, I believe Funimation does have a free trial, but then after that, there's kind of I think there's a monthly fee after that. But ultimately, I'm suggesting Anime Bogo just because it's a free option. But anyways, let's go out of our way to give you kind of a lead up. So I'm gonna give you a lead up and then give you a hill to die on, and then we're gonna go into spoilers so that way you guys know what this show is about. What is this show about? You've been demanding for the last I don't know 14 minutes almost. So we ultimately have a man who is ultimately a very much con artist. This is the guy that is showcased first. We have a guy who is otherwise a con artist that is basically trying to come up with any kind of cure for somebody's supernatural ailments without actually taking down a ghost. Like he is ultimately coming up with some kind of different variation of power or this and that he can just kind of make up at the top of his head, and he's coming up with all these words to kind of justify these people and con these people to where in the first meeting these people they already assume that this guy's a con artist, or he's just kind of like, this does not seem legit like at all. Like there's no way that this guy is what he says he is. Why don't we just call the Ghostbusters? Because if they're still open or if they're still in town. I don't know. Anyway, so we end up having this guy that is ultimately breaking down all these prices of his fees, his supernatural fees, and ultimately he is also very bizarrely like trying to come up with different kind of variations of supernatural cures, which is odd. So, anyways, we have it to where forcibly this this guy goes along with these people to their humble abode, and reasonably he goes and of course he can't actually see said spirit if it was actually legitimately there at the time that he arrives. Basically he kind of like tells all these like stories or has these like feelings, and they're not really true and they're not really real, or he ultimately like points at some building and it's not that building and ultimately he is the biggest swerver I could ever like come up with. Of every single time somebody presents something to somebody, he can sell ice to Eskimos. That's how good this guy is. So ultimately, he is going to this humble abode, and ultimately, he is just chucking salt around, and he is just like, I would have thought that he would have said some like random Latin words or something like that, or like I would have thought that he would have just kind of made up some scripture, or um, like had some God, what is it that the essence things that a lot of other supernatural characters have, like they burnt uh like what is the like cinnamon or something, cinnamon sticks or something, and but he doesn't. He just throws around salt, which I think is hilarious because I'm like, yeah, if you've seen any other supernatural movie, immediately they just bust out the salt. Like the salt is always going to do just everybody a salty good. All the while, like this guy just realizes that he's like, yeah, I just don't really think that I'm really like, I don't think this is really working. So he ends up grabbing his phone. He ends up calling up this character called Mob, which is ultimately a character that is, of course, a very much this house is clear, genuine poltergeist eliminator of sorts. Even though the woman in the movie Poltergeist didn't really do much of jack crap anything, from what I remember, it's not like she used her like psychic abilities to really and legitimately help a lick of anybody. She just sensed things. She's basically the equivalent of the red rum kid from Shining. But anyways, we have Mob who comes in. I'm gonna keep calling him Mob. I'm not gonna call him his actual name. Or I'm just gonna say like, hey, it's Mob's brother, and hey, it's Mob's friend, and hey, it's this person, because like names always elude me in shows or movies or whatever. But that is what it is. So Mob ultimately comes in, basically senses that there is a spiritual presence, lets his boss know. He's like, yeah, you really shouldn't be calling me at the drop of a hat to just kind of like help or come in and like eliminate things. But his boss is like, yeah, just get to your doing your thing. Mob ultimately quickly eliminates this ghost and makes him vanish, ninja vanish, and ultimately, like I don't think that this ghost was like this ghost was kind of like menacing, but it doesn't really seem like he could really legitimately do anything. Like this ghost really all just talk. But anyways, yeah, it ends up being that this mob guy is legit like real deal, and his boss is just this con artist that can talk him out of anything or talk him into anything. And because he can sell ice to Eskimos, so he can talk his way in and out of anything, and it'll just work. Maybe that is just his psychic ability, the ability to talk, I guess. But yeah, so like that is just kind of like the lead up that happens kind of numerous times. I really did enjoy like the first half of this show. Like kind of the second half, it does kind of really justifiably feel like I'm just like, man, I didn't really enjoy the second half. I really enjoyed the first half. The second half was kind of like, man, we kind of like turned this into like any anime that you've kind of seen in your life because realistically it's just like I liked the whole like ghost busting esh like things of this, and then when it kind of turned into like the battle of the psychics towards the end of this season, I was like, I don't like this at all. But I guess there's a natural like they do have like a natural progression of the show, but we ultimately have the character that is Mob, that is basically told that he cannot hurt other people, he cannot kill other people, and try to avoid that as much as possible. So now we have to take every single episode and now work around this person's just ability to not feel he should hurt other people. So there's a lot of people that kind of show off their cool and unique things going on. And I think Mob like it kind of like sucks because here's this like overly powered character that we really can't kind of showcase. Like we're showcasing like other people. We're kind of showcasing the B players, and that's where I was kind of like, yeah, I don't like this because reasonably now like here's like the like your focal point, and now immediately you're transitioning into already in the first season, hey, yeah, we're going to transition and have everybody else on this show get their stuff in, get their time in. And I was just like, well, what about the main character? Like the main character now is just a character that's just there. He's just there to kind of give internal dialogue, and everybody else is just now like the more important character, or you kind of have to invest in the side characters that are working with Mob. Ultimately there is much more than one grandiose Mob character, and ultimately that leads and bleeds to there being more psychics out there than just Mob. It ends up kind of being more and more people, and that leads to eventually being they're completely forgetting about the whole like what were we here originally for on this show. And like I just wish that it would have like I wish we could have spent more time with the ghosts and ghouls, stuff like that. I think that was more fun. I think that was a lot more fun. But anyways, I think it's about that time to go into spoilers about this show. Really talking about it and really going deep, deep down. I kind of gave you a let up of kind of like how the pilot kind of starts. So, anyways, I think it's about that time to get a double 5 time in there. So ultimately, at the end of the day, you can say that you had saw this review. Ultimately, if you want to check Mob Psycho 100, go ahead and do so. Let me know if there is another app, bear in fact, by the ones that I talked about, then you can ultimately see this anime. More than likely, you can probably see it on, I'm assuming, probably Amazon, maybe. You probably have to, like, pay for that, maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure. But anyways, let's get on to spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this show. Ultimately, to me, I wouldn't say that this is a bad show because I actually had fun with it. Like I ultimately like yeah, like I said, like I want to see kind of where the second season goes. Because ultimately, I can just say, well, hey, I just enjoyed half of one season, and like that was it for me. Um, that's where I can really break it down because, like, I like the supernatural s like stuff. Once you kind of get into the brain power, it's just like, yeesh. So, spoilers. Let's get into that time to spoil and rhyme. So, going into this show, yeah, the first episode is really funny and really fun and really presents this show really well to be just like, yeah, like if you're gonna go into the pilot knowing what is gonna go on in this show, it delivers that in spades. It like it hooks you within the first episode. So ultimately, we go into this show and we ultimately see Mob, who is ultimately whenever he would go in bizarrely both of the sons have to like eat their food with spoons where the parents are eating their food with chopsticks. I'm like, wouldn't they all eat their food with chopsticks? But again, of course, there's a reason for that. Ultimately, you have Mob who is consistently trying to eat his food with seemingly only a spoon, and seemingly every time the spoon droops and bends every single time. It's the consistently funny thing is that this kid like never expects this spoon to eventually just bend while he's eating food. So, and then his mother's just like, really? Again, son? Like, can't you just work that out? Can't you just figure out how to stop bending those spoons? You know how expensive those spoons are? Kind of like like general, like, oh, what the F? This again? With your power and such? Can't you just get a hold on that, son? Anyway, so we ultimately have it to where we have one son that seems to have powers and another son that is just kind of just like, man, like my brother does a lot of cool things. Maybe one day I'll be just like him and I'll be really cool. So ultimately, we have Mob who ultimately goes on to work consistently with this guy who is suit and tie, greatest con man in life, conning his own psychic compadre, mentioning consistently whenever Mob is basically just like, yeah, how is it that I saw this spirit and you didn't? It's like, or how is it that I can't see your power, boss? It's like, well, that's because I'm a spiritual psychic. You're a psychic or whatever. It's like they're different things, and it's like, okay, really? Wow, hilarious. So we ultimately go in here and we have it to where they go through this like this little like I would call it probably like a train station esque like thing because it's like this long like bricked like seemingly like railroad or train like section going through like a kind of I don't know how to explain it, but ultimately it's just kind of like this brick like housing situation. So in the very second episode, they have to where ultimately we have it to where the boss is taking Mob with him, and ultimately, like Mob really goes in there, and he's just like, "How about you kind of handle this time?" It's like, reasonably, it's like, yeah, I think, like, why is it that you're why is it that you're not going to handle this one? It's like, I think that uh these characters are more than easy enough for you to handle. And like the con artist is almost like wanting to say at some point, it's just because it's like, well, you're the one that can actually do this. Like, I can't. But like he kind of like is so close to saying that, but he doesn't. He's like, it's like, you should know how this works now. Like, I'm the guy that collects the check, and you're the guy that, like, takes care of things. And it seems like this guy is paying Mob, like, nickels and pennies, realistically, to take down these ghosts. But I guess, again, for Mob, like, yeah, this is just an easy breezy thing for him to do. So it's just no sweat off his back to get paid next to nothing. Anyways, Mob goes through here, and he starts like noticing that they're like, he's sensing like small ghosts here and there. But as his boss starts walking further along in this, let's call it a tunnel. That'll work. A tunnel. They go through this tunnel, and ultimately his boss just stumbles upon this wrestler that he assumes it's some wrestler. Yeah, there's some wrestler waiting for this guy in a dark tunnel, which I think was hilarious. It's like, oh, you're just a wrestler. And then it's like, but he has like a name slapped upon him called Boss or whatever. And then Mob has to tell his boss that he's just like, yeah, I think I can sense that there's like a very big boss presence that is right around you, sir. And then he's like, oh crap, like, you're not a wrestler. You're not a wrestler, you goon, or whatever. And then so we end up finding out that this ghost, this boss character, had some backstory where like there was a bunch of these bikers going through this tunnel, and they supposedly all their entire biker gang all slipped on this one banana and all died horribly in in a crash. And I'm just like, say what? Like, there's an entire biker gang that all slipped and fell on a banana via a motorcycle and all died. Okay, weird, bizarre, funny, hilarious. Ultimately, we have it to where it gets to the point of Mob and his boss kind of talking to this guy, talking him down from using his supernatural power, and kind of eventually just kind of talking him down to realize that he should move on. And they find a picture of him and his buddies to just kind of like bring that whole thing home. Such a weird and or bizarre episode, but I think everything kind of gets to that point in this show. So ultimately we go into this, and yeah, like, that is just one episode. I'm sure there's a ton of stuff that I'm probably going to miss out and just kind of skip over and just be like, yeah, well, that, like, I'm probably not going to say every single episode all in order, but everything is just so odd that I just enjoyed all of this. So we ultimately go into having, like, seemingly all these schools want to fight one another. It seems we go and have like this school going and talking smack to this other school, all the while eventually you find out that that Mob is ultimately going and wanting to like do weight training with these other muscular guys, and they're consistently talking about how important their weightlifting like is to them, and to where like nothing else matters. It's like hilarious how it's like some other people in some other school approaches these weightlifting guys and says, "Hey, like I want you to help us like fight off this other school. Like they're your rivals." And or something along those lines. And like the muscle bound guys are all just like, well, yeah, that sounds great and all, but like I got like 45 squats to bust out. Like I got like 1,200 jumping jacks to do before my day's up, kind of thing. It's like, bro, like these muscles aren't gonna keep them like those muscles aren't gonna keep ripping and growing if I don't, keep going with this. So ultimately, they kind of mastercraft this scenario, forcing one school to kidnap the supposedly weakest of the muscle bound guys, which of course is Mob, and like basically one place kidnaps the other, and then kind of like everybody else gets into this fight forcibly. So it ends up, of course, we have this one blonde-haired kid, long blonde-haired kid. We're going to have a lot of blonde-haired kids that ultimately have bizarre haircuts at some point. So we go and we eventually have like these people like fighting it out seemingly because they kind of really do have to. And it kind of gets to the point where Mob is just kind of like tied within all these ropes, and he's just kind of like he meets his muscle bound guys and he says, "Oh, hey, how's it going?" And like kind of treating it like he's not really like had been kidnapped or anything. It's just like, man, just a normal day. Like, hey, how's it going? Like, yeah, we should get back to our school so we can work out and this and that. And like it gets to the point to where like the muscle bound guys like beat up like the one squad that they were supposed to come and beat up. But then but eventually we have this blonde-haired kid who comes in and just like slaps people up, just kind of decks people with his hands, and they're just like, "Wow, this kid's like really muscular. Like it doesn't look like it, but man, he must have some severe muscle tone to just be like chopping people, and those chops are really decking people. Holy crap." It ends up that Mob ends up going to this guy and just kind of noticing. It's like, yeah, I know what you're doing. And the kid's just like, what? Like, what do you mean? And he's like, you're using psychic power to beat people up. Like, isn't that like that's kind of wrong? Like, I don't like that you're doing it. But then again, Mob doesn't exactly fight this guy off. He kind of puts up a lot of defensive barriers where this guy is like hitting him with like these like at some point this like psychic sword of some sort, and like throwing knives at him and like busting him through walls. And like it gets down to the point where they're really just annihilating this school, fighting through this school. And to the point where eventually once this kid throws these knives at Mob, accidentally when Mob goes to defend himself, these these knives end up ricocheting back onto this kid and end up slicing the very top of his hair. So he still has his long hair off to the side, but now he has this whole entire like top of his head gone. And so he looks like some like very like middle of the road guy that has completely just lost his hair, but he's still growing his hair out just because. So ultimately, now that this kid is pretty much just like completely and utterly ashamed that he has lost his mane of hair, because ultimately I guess that was the attractive thing about this guy. So not only that, he not only loses his hair, but then loses his clothes. Walks around having to be butt naked, because ultimately we're seeing the clickety click of percentages. We're getting to the point of, 80%. Oh, 90%. What's gonna happen when it counts down to 100%? What is gonna happen? So ultimately, this psychic character gets down to the point where really he just goes and tries to like have an endurance test to see how strong this character really is. To the point of everything that they're trying to do one another is just like counterbalancing. So this blonde haired kid just goes and looks like Hulk Hogan and goes and just freaking chokes the kid. He just chokes him until like he basically passes out. And then that is when this kid breaks into 100% and then turns all black. And then like that's where like the rules are out the window and this other persona doesn't work in the same ballpark that his other self does. And yeah, like this thing just annihilates everything. It's kind of like in a lot of terms, it's like the Century's The Void for a lot of comic book fans. If you've ever read the stories of the Century and heard about the Void, it's kind of like that. It's kind of like an undefeating entity that only appears when needing 100% power of uh, of Mob's brain. So ultimately, we're like, yeah. So we get to figure out what the 100 was, which is of course using 100% of this guy's mind. So going in here, we're still basically consistently told that Mob still can't kill or hurt people. And so ultimately, we find out that seemingly now, like the word has got out that Mob is this big thing. He's like, oh yeah, check out that guy. We're gonna call him the white tea poison or something like that. And I was like, what? Like, what the f is that? What the f is that? Like, I don't know what this is. Like, I'm very confused of what this thing is. And so everybody is trying to figure out who White Tea Poison is. And it's evidently Mob because they don't know who actually Mob is. And so basically, it ends up that Mob's brother ends up getting mistaken for him because basically, with the exception of like hairstyles, they honestly, I would get like a lot of times both of the characters really confused, even though Mob is supposedly the older brother. I was kind of like, I was getting them very confused myself, even though one, of course, had a certain hairstyle and one had the very much Mo from Three Stooges bowl cut, which maybe is still popular today. I don't know. Anyways, so we have Mom's brother, who ultimately is going into this street alley, and we have it to where there's pretty much like all of these big head honcho guys that have otherwise like they're like, hey, I'm up for the challenge. Yeah, I want to challenge this guy. Yeah, I want to challenge him too. Like, I think I can take him down. Like all these big head honcho, muscle bound, big gigantic looking freaking guys that otherwise they think they can physically beat this guy, but it's not like that. They don't understand it. They don't get it. So they end up fighting they end up fighting what they think is this white tea poison. And this kid doesn't have the rules that his brother has. So he, in all actuality, we've completely skipped over the happy episode or the LOL episode. So I guess I might have to skip back to that. So because it's important, because this character goes into the rest of the show. I guess I don't want to neglect it or forget it. So ultimately we have an entire episode where, or a bulk of an episode where Mob gets kind of processed into some cult. Mob goes in here and there's this cult leader who ultimately has these like rosy cheeks. It's weird. And this cult is called LOL, where it's consistently this cult has to laugh or has to smile, and that's how they have to live their life, as if like it's in a video game of We Happy Few. And so ultimately, we have this cult leader that wants everybody to smile and laugh. Well, Mob doesn't want to, like, he just can't smile. He just can't laugh. He doesn't have those kind of emotions in him. He's not really a real boy. So ultimately, Mob eventually has to kind of break these people out of this cult lock of smiling and laughing. And eventually, Mob has to fight this other psychic man. And eventually he takes him down. We find out that this guy is otherwise just this ghost entity. And eventually he decides to reconnect with Mob. But instead of reconnecting with Mob, he ends up reconnecting with his brother. And so he decides to help his brother activate his powers that are kind of dormant inside him, because ultimately we found on the episode previous to this that Mob's brother had been able to bend his spoon. It seemed like at first like he just ricocheted the spoon, but actually he like bent it. And so they found out that, oh, like his brother has power too, because ultimately we have an entire time where we have this brother that is consistently watching Mob, and he's like, wow, you can do all these cool stuff, man, it'd be great if I can do that too. Well, cue us now having this character being possessed by this ghost to help this kid be like kind of channel his inner psychic. But like at first, like this ghost wanted to just like take complete possession and power over this Mob's brother, but it didn't work. So because ultimately he's not strong enough. So ultimately, yeah, he just kind of had to participate. And then this ghost, like at first he's like supposedly this evil ghost, but more and more we go along into this Slimer Ash like character kind of rears his ugly head and just decides, you know what, how would I just help these people? Like that's what it seems like he just ends up doing. He just helps them out and just kind of chimes in every once in a while. So we end up going here and again rearing our ugly head back to the where we went to a tangent and then we came back to justify what otherwise I had to say to ultimately get to this point, because a lot of people go to be like, LOL, why didn't you mention it? Why didn't you mention this big episode that happened? I'm probably going to skip through a lot. Or there's probably going to be stuff that I have to come back to because tangents and what have you. So, White Tea Poison, he is going in this dark alley to fight all these people, and he's decking them. And, like, this is the lesser powered psychic. And so, ultimately, we find some weirdishly looking haired guy who has this kind of very much like this leaning tower of hair going on, and it's all blonde. Like, you know those like little like dustbuster things that like have like the little have the very like you have the stick, and then there's these like this big huge like this big of like feather like attachment going along with it, and you have to kind of like collect all the dust, like one of those kinds of things. Like, but this guy's hair's like that. Like, imagine like a corn dog or a hot dog with hair. Like, imagine that. Uh, like it's and that's like Marge Simpson. Like imagine Marge Simpson. Everybody knows the Simpsons. Everybody knows the Simpsons. Imagine a blonde-haired Marge Simpson. Basically, what this character looks like. It's freaking weird. It looks hilarious, and I was just like, man, how is this kid keeping this hair up through all this battling and this and that? But anyways, we find this random kid who's ultimately like, hey, that's not the real true white tea, whatever. So ultimately, he goes and he brings the real white tea poison to this street alley to confront whoever this other person that is saying that that is him. And so all the while, this brother is decking all these people. Eventually, gets down to there being a much more experienced entity that is going to go up against this psychic's brother, and he has a kind of very weird power set, but ultimately he has this like these abilities that kind of like deck a bunch of people as well. He has all these like piercings, and he's like in a hoodie, and he's very like weird and punkish. Uh, just yeah, very strange and weird powers. Anyway, so we end up eventually having to wear, of course, the actual mob actually reappears into the street alley and ultimately wants to reason with this hooded guy that decked everybody. And all the while, he also wants to apologize to all the people that got beaten up by his brother. And so he's like begging them to all forgive him and his brother. And they're just like, oh well, yeah, you need to beg harder because I got beaten up by him. Yeah, you gotta lick my toes and kiss my ring finger and this and that, and like you gotta really mean it. And like, really? Come on. So this hooded guy gets eventually decked by uh seemingly gets decked. So ultimately, yeah, like we get to the point to where now we get to the point to where it seems like there's starting to be more and more psychics a brewing, and it gets to the point to where there are also these like evil psychics that now have to come up with this whole regime of evil goonish psychics, and basically they just want to collect other psychics to just kind of brainwash them and use them for their benefit. All the while, we realize that that when going into like Mob's brother, going into this section of these psychics where we have a bunch of these kids, that it's like, oh yeah, this person has like this amazing power. Hey, isn't it great? Like these two twins can easily like uh, know the exact same card that the other kid does. Oh yeah, it's just great as email. We have a girl that can guess by 60% accuracy which card is the right card out of some kind of memory game. We eventually see a guy who has like the very much Chris Evans Fantastic Four power, where ultimately it's like, oh yeah, this guy is pyrokinesis or whatever, where ultimately he can like summon fire, and this kid's like, yeah, like I can do it like that, and then he's like, I can do it like, and he keeps trying, and then he has like this tiny little flame that comes out of one finger, and like Mob's Brothers is like, wow, these guys are great. Whoo! I'm so excited to join this elite group of kids. I'm just barely like, what the are they? What? Why am I even here with these people for? Like, this is pointless. This doesn't feel like anywhere near my class of people to be with. But all these people start to get collected. They all get collected to go to this evil regime to get brainwashed and for their powers to be used for evil. All while also, uh, also having eventually to have Mob's brother get collected as well. So we go into this, and ultimately we have Mob having to go in here to rescue his brother, and again, this guy can't really fight anything, but we have like all of his like quasi like friends going along with him to rescue all these people. It's kind of like the Rambo mission where he has to go and like protect all the people behind enemy lines. Recently, it gets down to where ultimately, like, funny enough, we have all these like weird and wild entities that are coming in here, and we find out all these like kind of different supernaturalist like characters. Like there's one character that can summon a lot of like ghostly entities to him to help him fight another ghost. It's weird. We also have kind of other kind of like female people that can use like an entire like mannequins or dolls or whatever to like create an army, which of course Mob just tears through because they're not living things. Eventually getting to the point where Mob has to fight this woman, and he's like, I don't want to fight you. He's like crying and stuff. He's like, I don't want to fight you. And the woman's like, why? It's like, well, my boss told me that I shouldn't fight a woman. It's like, and so like the woman is just like, well, well, yeah, that's great and all, but like I'm giving you permission to fight me 100% with all that you've got. and like, and I'm just like, okay, sure. Like again, when Mob's life is on the line, he has just these like morality things going on in his head where nothing else matters. Like his life is not in the balance in his own head. Because again, he can just 100% himself and then deck everybody. But anyways, we we go into these people just fighting it out. It ends up that bizarrely, Mob's boss has to come in there and to rescue them, which I think is hilarious. So Mob's boss goes in there, and of course he just talks his way into this base where all these minion people are thinking, "Oh my God, he must be the big boss." Yeah, like it seems like he's convincingly talking to the point where like he might be their big boss. So, and ultimately everybody's up in arms because they're like, "Oh my God, the big boss is here to see what's going on." Ooh, and we find out it's just the poor schlub that con artist his way in there, talking to all these people, ultimately just saying, "Hey, like, how about you just release these people? Like I don't know, this seems kind of wrong and it seems kind of dumb." Oh God, I remember one time where Mob goes into uh, this like antique artist thing, and supposedly like the artist people are trying to make him break something into this artist thing so he would have to forcibly pay for it. His boss comes in, and of course, like this Mob kid had barely cracked this one vase thing, and so like the artist wants them to pay for it, and it's like, no, like I don't have the the kind of money to afford, like, it was like $5 million or something like that. And so the boss comes in and, like, basically, he comes in and, like, he basically, like, in a very lawyer like way, comes in there and he's like, yeah, there's no way that that is actually worth the money that you're talking about, that that vase is actually worth. I've seen, like, so many other things in the market that are, like, not even close to what that actually is. And so ultimately the guy is, like, yelling at him, like, how could you say this, and blah 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 blah. And then the boss breaks down and he's just like, how could you treat me like that? Man, I should take you to court and sue you for all the stuff that you just said to me. Like, if anything, like, yeah, like you, like, suing, like, I should sue you, and I should sue you for $1 million. And then, oh yeah, like, recently, because I had to come all the way down here, and and I had to have the jeopardy of my associate just kind of weighing in my hands. There's another million, and then he just starts, like, breaking down, like, all of these million, 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 and, like, it gets to the point where it equals the exact same price of the vase, to where it just feels like, yeah, well, how about we just don't go to court then, and then you just eat the price of this vase. And I just thought that was hilarious. But we ultimately come back here, and now we have this boss that is going through here, and he is there's so many funny things that I'm probably completely missing out on this show, but that's what kind of really popped in there consistently to be funny. And I know I'm missing out on a ton of stuff, so much more stuff that I think is hilarious going through here, because it's very much like, it's the Naked Gun attempt of, like, anime to me. It's kind of like the hilarity of it all. So we go in here, and boss is coming in there, and he's talking his way, just, like, acting all big and whatever, seeming like he's gonna use his power on people again, as if he still has it. And it is kind of funny and interesting to see this boss ultimately, like, use these unique, like, powers. Like, supposedly he had, like, salt in his hand, and he punched somebody at one point, and at one point he also, like, drop kicked somebody as hard as he could, and that was, like, his secret power that he had, like, just lying in wait. Yeah, his and his salt splashing power at the very early portion of this. Oh my god, this boss guy is hilarious. The boss guy over Mob. So he eventually just kind of, like, talks his way to get all these people released, and kind of get to where Mob is, like, kind of just, like, okay with everything. And then so, like, they kind of are all heading out. They're just like, hey, we're all going to get released. He's really talking a good game. And it ends up getting to where we have, like, the big, most evilish characters all going and just like, oh, the boss must be here. He must be here. And so they look at this guy in some hallway somewhere, and, like, that's not the boss. And bizarrely, like, the minion characters are on the boss's side, and they're just like, oh no, I think you're wrong about this, like, truly, really, this is the guy. It's like, no. So it ends up that, like, the evildoers, the evil psychics, are going to just go and attack everybody, or blast, or whatever, everybody that's kind of in that within the boss and mob's area, even, like, the minions that are collected in there. And the minions are just like, no, don't hurt us, like, we're on your side. And they're just like, whatever, you're there. It's like, dude, you're just pawns. Like, there's evidently some people that could supposedly have some still dormant potential, but really it's already been, like, snuffed out, to where if it hadn't been at some point where they had really got into getting these powers, then they never really will. But and those are like the wannabes, I guess. The wannabe people that are just like, yeah, I can eventually help you at some time if only my powers would have would have showed up, would have showed up right then and there, and just been able to do this. So, anyways, we get to the point where there is, of course, this all big fight out, this and that, and everybody's fighting, and eventually it gets down to the point to where if the boss isn't drop kicking people, then it seems like he is just he's trying to just talk people out of fighting him, which I think is hilarious because that's all he's got. So basically, it gets down to the point where eventually Mob's boss ends up getting to the point where he's consistently talking to Mob, and he's like, "Don't fight them. Don't use the powers. Like, I know that you would want to just like deck everybody, but don't do it." Where everybody else is using their powers and they're kind of deflecting some things and this and that. So everybody's kind of getting on into it. It's the big fight out moment, and so we end up finding that Mob's boss ends up getting like cut in the back and he drops. We're like, oh my god, don't tell me Mob's boss is gonna be dead. And like that's how they're gonna end this season, with like Mob's boss being dead. How is he gonna get all his how is he gonna get all of his bookings? Because really Mob's boss is the guy that sells all this stuff to people, where Mob is just the guy that just shows up and just go away ghosts, and he makes them disappear. He diminishes them. So he drops, and then ultimately we see that Mob is gonna get razor edge close to that 100% and just annihilate everybody. But instead, this power goes from 100% to 1000%, and this character transfers his ability from Mob himself to his boss, and his boss gets back up and then just starts decking people, like making fun of people, like calling them out on their stupid outfits and their stupid clothes, and how like, why do you have shoulder pads on? Why do you have like shoulder pads on the sides of your cape? This makes no sense. Like, why do you have this like weird, like bizarrish, like design on the top of your head? It makes no sense. And like consistently just like running through all these people, and ultimately like somebody like sprays him in the face with this mace stuff that supposedly is supposed to beat psychics, and like he just brushes us off and is like, dude, I had my mouth open, kind of thing. And then he still like attacks people, and like he just bizarrely strongly just starts beating people, and he's just like, how is it that I'm doing this? It's like, well, yeah, it must just be Mob. Maybe he's just protecting me this whole entire time, or maybe like he just did something to me. But he's just like, man, I'm having a good time. So he's just heckling the crap out of all these people and making fun of all of them and how goofy they all look. And so like eventually, like we have it to where this gas mask guy gets unmasked, and the entire time you're thinking it's a woman, but it's actually a man. And ultimately he has this like goofy looking like scars all over his face, and like this guy comes and tries to like attack these people, but of course it doesn't work because the good guys have to win in this thing. So we get down to everybody get just kind of really just gets decked by the boss, and then they all just kind of just all really legitimately just all walk out. And like there's still this like villainous thing looming that like the real villain is gonna come for these people and just gonna take them down and this and that, but like it's kind of here or there, neither here nor there right now because everybody's just kind of like, yeah, we beat these people and yay, like how about we just go on home and just kind of do some kind of like random esh like things here and there and this and that, um, and kind of like have it to where the kid bends his spoon while he's eating again, and then his brother fixes up the spoon by using his psychic powers. So yeah, it's just kind of like we also have a tender point where his brother is like where Mob is consistently going to his brother and like mentioning that he's gonna be like way better than Mob himself at some point and this and that, like really buttering him up, really just kind of going like, yeah, you're gonna be like you're the best brother, like you're gonna be better than I am and this and that, because ultimately like the brother mentioned for like the longest time that he felt like living in Mob's shadow. Told me it's just like Mob was just like, no, you're gonna be way better than I am, and like obviously you're pretty much close to almost being that. So, anyways, yeah, that's kind of like the last. I'm sure there's so many good, funny things going on in this show, but I think that's all the time that I want to take up, really, for this show. Um, there's some like the things that I didn't like about the show is like it just didn't like have like some episodes like didn't just have a clear cut just ending, like it had like where there was footage like in the credits, and I was just like I honestly like animes that it's just clearly you just like have a credit sequence and you just end the show. I guess a lot of people are just kind of gripe and just say like, dude, the episodes are short enough. Like, just like why not have some end credit scenes or whatever that kind of go through the whole entire credits? Why not just do that? I don't know. Maybe I'm just griping about that or whatever, but yeah, to me, still like the first half of the show was like really funny, really hilarious, and then every once in a while I got some like hilarious things in here or there, but dare say this is a very funny Mob Psycho 100. Ultimately, I think reasonably I will probably go into season two. Ultimately, if it doesn't drastically change like season one did, or it kind of like I hope it goes back to what I liked best about the show. Yeah, because like going into Tokyo Ghoul, like Tokyo Ghoul, like I loved the first season, but then once we got into the other seasons, I'm like, what the F is this? Every single other season of Tokyo Ghoul is not like the first season of Tokyo Ghoul. It just goes and does its own thing, and I just thought that was freaking weird. I'm like, dude, like Tokyo Ghoul season one was the bomb. But I don't understand why all of a sudden they had to like go on this drastic different variation and just like excel this thing to, oh yeah, this character is much older and now we're in these bizarrish war things and it doesn't make any sense. So I'm hoping season two stays along those same veins, those same lines. I don't know if in time people will ultimately want to hear my thoughts on season two. But yeah, thinking about doing it because it was a fun anime. Very rarely do you ever get like real animes that have comedy in it. You can kind of chuckle here and there, but dare say there's not a lot of really funny animes. Everything is just so serious or so straightforward that I think they forget that like you should actually have fun while watching the show and you should be laughing consistently. But anyways, I'm gonna get out of here so I can do other things for the day. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.